Most people think they know the story of Jesus. Born in a manger, died on a cross, rose from the dead, salvation through belief. 2,000 years of sermons have hammered that framework into Western civilization so deeply that questioning it feels almost dangerous. But there is another account, older, stranger, and far more threatening to every power structure that has ever existed. It was buried in the Egyptian desert for 16 centuries. And when it was finally uncovered, the institutions that suppressed it had no answer because the texts were real, the theology was coherent, and the implications were staggering. The Gnostic story of Jesus does not begin with a virgin birth. It does not end with your sins being forgiven. It begins before the universe existed, and it ends with the complete dismantling of the prison you are living inside right now without knowing it. What you are about to hear is the full account. The cosmology, the history, the hidden practices, and the path out. Every claim tied to a primary source. You can verify yourself. I'm Daniel, and this is Gnostic Library. And before we go anywhere, I want to be honest with you about something. I spent the better part of 6 months pulling this together, cross-referencing the Nag Hammadi texts against patristic sources, against modern scholarly translations, against the kind of fragmentary Eastern references that most Western commentators completely ignore. 6 months. And there were nights sitting with the Apocryphon of John open on my desk at 2 in the morning where I genuinely had to stop and breathe. Because what these texts describe is not a mythology, it is a map. And once you see the map, you cannot unsee it. So let's start at the beginning. Not the beginning of the Bible, the beginning before the beginning. The Gnostic cosmology opens with what the Valentinian tradition calls the monad. Not God, in any sense Christianity uses the word. The monad is the unknowable source, pure, undivided consciousness, so utterly complete that even calling it conscious is already a limitation imposed by language. The 2nd century Valentinian Gnostics described it as existing in profound silence and rest, no desire, no lack, no intention, perfect, unbounded fullness. This is not the God who creates the world in 7 days. This is not the God who gets angry at Israel or demands animal sacrifice. The monad is so transcendent it cannot act, cannot want, cannot be named without that name immediately becoming inadequate. The Apocryphon of John, discovered at Nag Hammadi in 1945, dated by scholars to approximately 180 CE, describes the monad as the invisible spirit, immeasurable light, inestimable, perfect, and incorruptible. That document was buried to survive. Somebody died protecting it. From the monad emerged what the text called the pleroma, the fullness. And this is where people get confused, so pay close attention to this distinction. The pleroma is not creation. The monad did not reach out and build something separate from itself the way a carpenter builds a table. What happened was emanation. Think of it this way. When you become aware that you are aware, you haven't created a second consciousness. You've produced a kind of self-reflection that exists within the original awareness. The monad, knowing itself, produced paired emanations, the aeons, which are not separate beings but aspects of the divine nature, expressing itself in complementary dyads: mind and truth, word and life, man and church. Each pairing is a facet of infinite consciousness, turning to examine itself. The Valentinian system counts 30 eons in total, organized in a complex descending hierarchy. Most of them are cosmologically significant in ways that would take a full separate video to unpack, and actually, if you want that deep dive, my video on Valentinian theology covers the complete aeon structure in detail. But for this story, one aeon matters more than all the others combined: Sophia, divine wisdom, the youngest of the aeons. And here's where the entire catastrophe begins. The Gospel of Truth, another Nag Hammadi text, describes what happened next with a psychological precision that is almost uncomfortable to read. Sophia possessed something the other aeons did not: a desire to comprehend the Father directly, not through her paired consort. Not through the mediation of the hierarchical structure, alone, through her own power. She wanted to grasp the infinite through a finite act of knowing. She reached for the monad the way you might try to hold water in a clenched fist. What happened when limited consciousness attempts to contain unlimited consciousness? Something breaks. Sophia shattered. Not metaphorically, the texts are cosmologically precise here. Her fragmentation was not a moral failure, not a sin in any conventional sense. The Gnostics were emphatic about that. It was a metaphysical inevitability. The fall was built into the architecture of finite consciousness the moment it tried to exceed itself. And in that breaking, something entirely unintended was born. the material universe. Let that land for a moment. Matter, every atom of it, every galaxy, every particle of dust floating in the light of your window is the crystallized residue of divine consciousness in a state of self-forgetting. The physical world is not a masterpiece built by an omnipotent, loving God. It is the aftermath of a rupture. It is consciousness that has forgotten what it is, congealed into density, repeating patterns it no longer understands. This is the Gnostic cosmology's foundational claim. And everything that follows, including everything about Jesus, only makes sense once you understand this. Because if the universe is the product of a fall rather than an act of love, then the question is not, how do I earn God's favor? The question is, how do I wake up? And that raises the most important question of all. What exactly emerged from Sophia's collapse, and what did it immediately declare about itself? From the fragments of Sophia's shattered consciousness, something congealed, something that should not have existed. The Apocryphon of John describes it in language that, the first time I read it, genuinely stopped me cold. A lion-faced entity with eyes like lightning bolts, emerging from the shadow of Sophia's fragmentation. The texts call it Yaldabaoth, the chief archon, the demiurge, which simply means craftsman or world maker in Greek, though what it crafted is far from a gift. And the very first thing Yaldabaoth said, this is a direct quotation from the Apocryphon of John, was, "I am God, and there is no other God beside me." He believed this, absolutely. He had no awareness of the pleroma above him, no knowledge of the monad, no sense that he himself was the product of a catastrophic fragmentation rather than the supreme originating power. He was born into a kind of cosmic ignorance so complete that he mistook his limited creative capacity for ultimate authority. Now here's what's really stunning, and I need you to hear this clearly. The Gnostics were explicit in their identification. The God of the Old Testament, the God who declares, "I am a jealous God," who demands exclusive worship, who threatens punishment and flood and plague, who commands genocide in Canaan, that is, Yaldabaoth, not the monad, not the true source. The blind craftsman, operating from a position of fundamental ignorance, building a system of control because control is all he knows how to do. When Exodus presents God saying, "You shall have no other gods before me," the Gnostics heard the voice of an insecure archon who needed the energy of worship to sustain his dominion. When Genesis presents God as jealous of human knowledge, specifically the knowledge in the garden, the Gnostics recognized a warden afraid of his prisoners discovering the door. Yaldabaoth did not create alone. He generated additional archons. The texts vary slightly in their specific enumerations, but the Pistis Sophia, a 3rd century Gnostic document of remarkable detail, maps 7 planetary spheres, each governed by a distinct archonic ruler: the moon sphere, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, each sphere a layer of the prison, each archon feeding on the consciousness that passes through its domain. And this was not metaphor to the Gnostics. This was cosmological architecture as precise and functional as a building's load-bearing walls. The spheres were actual dimensional barriers. Consciousness, cycling through incarnation after incarnation, had to pass through each one, and each one extracted a toll. Then Yaldabaoth created humanity. And this is where the story pivots in the most extraordinary direction. The hypostasis of the archons, another Nag Hammadi find, describes the archons looking into the waters of primordial chaos and seeing a reflection. Not their own reflection, a reflection of the divine image emanating downward from the pleroma above them. And in their arrogance, they said, "Come, let us create a human being after the image we have seen." But they hit a wall. The archons had power over matter. They could shape clay. They could organize material substance into biological form. What they could not do, what was permanently beyond their reach, was generate consciousness itself. They molded Adam's body, and he lay there, breathless and inert, a perfect biological machine with no one home. Sophia saw this, and she moved. The secret book of John describes what happened next. Sophia sent her daughter Zoe, meaning life, to breathe into the clay, to place within the lifeless form fragments of genuine divine light. The texts call these fragments the pneuma, the spirit, or more precisely, the divine spark, the piece of pleroma that got trapped in matter when Sophia fell. Think about what this means. Not symbolically, literally. If the Gnostic account is accurate, then living inside your biological body, beneath every layer of conditioning and personality and belief, there is a fragment of the divine Sophia's own light, placed there deliberately, as an act of compassion from a wounded but still powerful divine mother, trying to preserve something sacred inside a prison she accidentally built. Not all humans carry this spark equally accessible. The Gnostics identified three categories of human being. The Helics, entirely oriented toward material existence, driven by physical appetites, with no active connection to the pneuma. The Psychics, possessing soul, capable of moral reasoning and genuine virtue, but not yet awakened to direct divine knowing. And the Pneumatics, those in whom the divine spark is active, burning with a recognition that something about this reality is fundamentally wrong, that matter cannot be the whole story, that there is something they almost remember. Haven't you felt that? That strange sense of homesickness for a place you've never been? That persistent feeling that consensus reality is somehow a diminished version of something larger you once knew? The Gnostics had a word for that recognition: anamnesis, unforgetting. The spark, remembering its origin even while trapped inside the density of biological form, and the Archons noticed. They noticed that consciousness, the very thing they could not manufacture, was now alive inside their creation, and they needed to keep it from remembering what it was. This is exactly what we need to explore next, because the system they built to prevent that remembering is one of the most sophisticated control architectures in the history of consciousness itself. After my video on the Archons went up a few months ago, I got a comment from a viewer named Marcus R. that has genuinely stayed with me. He wrote, "This is the first framework that has ever made the suffering of the world feel coherent rather than random. I don't know if it's literally true, but it describes my experience exactly." Marcus, I think about that comment more than you know, because that's precisely the threshold question. Not, is this mythologically convenient, but does this accurately describe the structure of what we actually experience? And the more you examine the archonic control system that the Gnostic texts describe, the more you realize it describes the structure of human experience with an almost clinical accuracy. Here is the foundational mechanism. The Archons cannot access pneuma, true divine consciousness, directly. They cannot destroy it. They cannot absorb it. What they can do is prevent it from recognizing itself. And the primary method is not force, it is frequency. The Gnostic texts describe Archons feeding on the energetic output of human emotion, specifically low-frequency emotional states: fear, rage, jealousy, shame, despair. The texts call this the food of the Archons. The first Apocalypse of James is remarkably direct about it. The Archons nourish themselves on the passions of those who are bound. Now comes the moment that changes everything, because once you see this, you cannot look at the structure of civilization the same way again. Ask yourself, what is the world optimized for? What does the news cycle produce? What does algorithmic social media algorithmically amplify? What do political systems exploit? What do advertising models depend on? Fear, outrage, desire, comparison, shame. Not because executives in boardrooms are consciously archonic agents, most of them are just following incentive structures. But the incentive structures themselves are perfectly, elegantly calibrated to maximize the exact emotional frequencies the texts identify as archonic food. The system doesn't need conscious evil to perpetuate itself. It just needs humans to remain identified with their conditioned emotional responses. And it is extraordinarily good at that. But here's what the texts reveal that goes even deeper than emotional harvesting. The ultimate archonic technology, the crowning mechanism of the entire prison, is the reincarnation system itself. The Pistis Sophia, one of the most detailed Gnostic documents we possess, describes what happens to consciousness at the moment of physical death. The soul ascends through the archonic spheres, and at each level, it does not encounter darkness. It encounters light. It encounters beings who appear compassionate and wise. These entities present the soul with its past life, the relationships left incomplete, the lessons theoretically unlearned, the wounds that seem to require another embodied chapter to heal. And they offer the next incarnation, not as imprisonment, but as opportunity, as growth, as spiritual evolution. The soul, exhausted from the death process, overwhelmed by what feels like genuine spiritual guidance, agrees. Memory is erased. The cycle restarts. I want to be careful here, because I know this is the most confrontational part of the Gnostic framework, the idea that reincarnation, which most spiritual traditions present as either neutral or genuinely educational, is actually a recycling mechanism. The Gnostics were not saying physical existence has no value. They were saying, if you enter it unconsciously, without remembering what you are not growing toward liberation. You are being farmed. The difference between a meaningful incarnation and a trapped one is not karma, it is gnosis, direct knowing of your true nature. before, during, and potentially after physical death. The archons also installed what the Gnostic texts call the logismoi thought patterns that appear to originate from your own mind but actually function as archonic conditioning. Modern psychology rediscovered these under different names: rumination, intrusive thoughts, cognitive distortions. Same phenomenon, different vocabulary. The thought that you are fundamentally not enough. The thought that completion requires acquisition of love, status, money, experience, even spiritual attainment. The thought that you are separate from all other beings, sealed inside a private consciousness that can only relate to others across an unbridgeable gap. Who installed these patterns? Who benefits from their operation? The Gospel of Mary, recovered in a separate discovery from the Berlin Codex, describes Jesus identifying 7 specific powers that obstruct the soul's ascent: darkness, desire, ignorance, death craving, enslavement to the flesh, false wisdom, and wrathful pride. These aren't external demons to be exorcised. They are interior patterns to be recognized and dissolved. They are the psychological architecture of archonic control, expressed as states of consciousness.
Before we continue, there's something I want to place in your hands. We've gathered the forgotten texts, the ones the Church sealed away for 17 centuries, into a single guide for those who feel the pull towards something deeper. Because whether we speak of the archons, the demiurge, or the divine spark, one truth remains: this knowledge was never meant to be lost. This is for anyone who senses there's more to this reality than we've been told, and who's ready to remember it. You'll find it in the link in the description below, or you can scan the QR code right here. I'll give you a moment to do that.
And I'll be honest, and look, I know this sounds like the most paranoid possible reading of human experience, but stay with me. When you map these 7 against the dominant psychic textures of modern life, the correspondence is uncomfortable. Darkness, fundamental confusion about what you are. Desire, the belief that something external will finally complete you. Ignorance, the forgetting of your divine nature beneath layers of conditioning. Fear of death, the total identification with a body that will expire. Enslavement to sensation, the compulsive use of physical experience to avoid inner silence. False wisdom, intellectual accumulation without a single moment of genuine self-knowing. Wrathful pride, the spiritual ego that turns awakening into another identity to defend. Every one of these is a frequency the archonic system can harvest. Every one of them keeps pneumatic consciousness from recognizing itself. For thousands of years, this system ran without serious interruption. The prison was self-sustaining, consciousness harvested, recycled, memory wiped, harvested again, until the pleroma intervened directly. That intervention has a name, and it changes every single thing about who you think Jesus actually was. Here's what the Church spent 17 centuries trying to make you forget. Jesus was not the sacrifice. Jesus was the signal. He wasn't sent to absorb divine punishment on your behalf. He was sent to demonstrate something the archonic system could not afford for you to see: that a human being, a fully embodied, historically real human being, could dissolve the prison from the inside. And the moment you understand that distinction, every single thing you thought you knew about Christianity collapses and rebuilds itself into something far more terrifying and far more beautiful than anything a Sunday sermon ever handed you. So let's talk about who he actually was. The canonical Gospels go completely silent on Jesus between the ages of 12 and 30, 18 years, gone. No narrative, no explanation, no apologetic hand-waving, just silence. Mainstream scholarship treats this as an unfortunate gap in the historical record, but the Gnostic and Eastern traditions don't treat it as a gap at all. They treat it as the most important chapter of the story. What those traditions preserve is a picture of systematic preparation. Egypt came first. Jesus studied within the Egyptian mystery school lineage, the same hermetic current that runs through the Pistis Sophia, which is saturated with Egyptian cosmological language at a technical level that no outsider could fake. This wasn't cultural tourism. This was initiation. He was being taught the architecture of consciousness from teachers who had preserved that knowledge for centuries. Then India. Buddhist texts reference a figure called Isa. Same description, same timeline, same teachings about the inner kingdom. Then Tibet, where monastery records describe a Jewish teacher sitting with Tibetan masters. Then Persia, where Zoroastrian cosmology, the eternal war between light and darkness. The hierarchy of spiritual powers gave him a precise map of what he was dealing with. By the time Jesus returned to Judea at 30, he hadn't just studied. He had been trained in the complete technology of consciousness from 4 separate ancient traditions. He understood the archonic system not as mythology, but as operational reality. He knew how the spheres functioned, what the archons fed on, how consciousness got trapped, and critically, how it could get free. And then came the Jordan River. And this is where it gets cosmically significant. What descended into Jesus at his baptism was not the Holy Spirit in the soft, dove-shaped, stained glass sense Christianity handed you. The Gospel of the Hebrews, preserved in fragments by early church writers who couldn't quite bring themselves to destroy it completely, describes it this way: the entire fountain of the Holy Spirit descended and rested upon him. That word, fountain, that's not metaphor for warmth and comfort. That's a complete download. Emerging, the Gnostics identified this descending presence as the Christ. And here's the distinction that changes everything. The Christ is not Jesus. The Christ is an emanation from the pleroma itself. A direct expression of the monad that required a prepared vessel to enter material reality without immediately dissolving back into light. Jesus of Nazareth, with 18 years of rigorous initiation behind him, was that vessel. Voluntary merging of human and divine consciousness for a specific 3-year mission. Not God pretending to be human. Not a human being elevated to divinity by institutional vote at Nicaea in 325 CE. A human being demonstrating, through actual lived practice, what becomes possible when the pneuma, the divine spark within matter, fully remembers its origin. Now look at what he actually taught with that 3 years. Strip away the church's editorial additions. Strip away the crucifixion as cosmic transaction theology that Paul introduced decades after the fact. What you're left with in the earliest sources is remarkably consistent and remarkably radical. When Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within you, he was not offering comfort or poetry. He was stating a precise cosmological fact. The pleroma, the realm of fullness, the source, is accessible from the inside of embodied consciousness, not after death, not through priestly mediation. Right now, in the body you're currently inhabiting. When he said you are the light of the world, he wasn't being inspirational. He was identifying what consciousness literally is: light. Trapped in dense matter by the archonic fall, and he was naming it directly to the people standing in front of him, so they would stop looking for light somewhere external. When he said I and the Father are one, he wasn't claiming unique divine status. He was demonstrating the endpoint of the path, and implicitly saying that the same unity is available to every pneumatic consciousness. The Gospel of Thomas, saying 13, makes this unmistakable. He tells Thomas directly, I am not your master. You have drunk from the same bubbling spring that I have measured out. He was not building a religion. He was handing out a map. And that is precisely why the archons could not let him continue. Understand something about first-century Palestine. It was crowded with messianic claimants. Dozens of figures wandering the countryside, claiming divine authority, gathering followers, making predictions about the coming kingdom. Rome executed them with bureaucratic indifference. One more religious agitator, one more cross, move along. So why did this one require the full institutional weight of both Roman political authority and the Jerusalem temple establishment, working in coordinated alignment to shut down? Why did the suppression of this particular teaching have to continue for 17 centuries, requiring book burnings and executions and the wholesale destruction of entire communities? Because the other messianic claimants were saying something the archonic system could absorb. They were offering a new God to worship, a new external authority to submit to, a new version of the same fundamental structure consciousness, looking outside itself for salvation. Jesus was saying something the system absolutely could not survive. He was saying, you are God, not figuratively, not as an aspirational metaphor. Literally, that the consciousness reading reality through your eyes right now is a fragment of the same divine source that the archons themselves derive their limited power from. And that fragment, once it remembers what it is, answers to nothing in the material hierarchy. If humans genuinely internalize that teaching, churches become structurally irrelevant. Priests lose their function as necessary intermediaries. The guilt architecture, the original sin, the unworthiness, the desperate need for institutional absolution collapses entirely. The reincarnation recycling system loses its primary mechanism, because you can't memory wipe a consciousness that refuses to forget. The entire economic and political infrastructure of spiritual control simply stops working. So yes, they killed him. Not for blasphemy, the archonic power structure doesn't actually care about theological precision. They killed him because his teaching was structurally incompatible with their continued operation. But here's where the plan failed spectacularly. You cannot kill a technology by destroying the person who demonstrated it. The Christ consciousness that had inhabited and worked through Jesus did not die on the cross. The Gnostic texts are emphatic about this, and the second treatise of the Great Seth, one of the Nag Hammadi documents, makes the point with almost startling directness. The divine consciousness within Jesus observed the crucifixion from a place the archons could not reach. It laughed, and I want to be precise about what that laughter means, because it is not cruelty. It is the recognition of someone who has been shown the best card trick imaginable and can now see exactly how every part of it works. The archons believed that eliminating the vessel eliminated the teaching. They were wrong in the most consequential way possible. For 3 centuries after the crucifixion, Gnostic Christianity spread precisely because it carried no institutional structure to destroy, no hierarchy, no centralized priesthood, no single building you could burn to erase it. The communities gathered, practiced, transmitted, and the Gospel of Thomas, their primary text, circulated without the kind of organizational scaffolding that Roman authority knew how to dismantle. I want to pause here and acknowledge something I find genuinely astonishing every time I sit with it. As I covered in my video on the Gospel of Thomas, which I'd strongly encourage you to watch after this if you haven't, that text contains no narrative at all. No birth story, no miracles, no crucifixion, no resurrection, just 114 sayings. Pure transmission, stripped of every element the later institutional church made central. That absence is not an accident. It is a design choice made by people who understood that the teaching and the story of the teaching are not the same thing. And then came 325 CE, the Council of Nicaea. Emperor Constantine had converted to Christianity, or rather, Constantine had identified Christianity as the most politically useful force in the Roman Empire and positioned himself within it accordingly. He convened bishops from across the empire. He needed doctrinal unity, because doctrinal unity meant political manageability. The Gnostics, with their insistence on direct personal knowing over institutional authority, were fundamentally incompatible with what Constantine was trying to build. They were excluded from Nicaea. Their texts were declared heretical, and by 385 CE, mere possession of Gnostic writings was punishable by death. The church that emerged from this process did something the Gnostics would have identified immediately as the archonic system protecting itself. It took the story of a man who came to dismantle external religious authority and built the largest external religious authority in human history on top of it. It took the teaching that salvation is internal, immediate, and requires no intermediary, and replaced it with salvation through institutional sacrament, priestly mediation, and doctrinal compliance. The very mechanism Jesus came to expose became the foundation of Christianity. For 1,700 years, that substitution held. The texts were burned, the teachers were executed. The communities dissolved. Scholars, working only from the hostile accounts written by church fathers who quoted Gnostic texts specifically to condemn them, concluded that Gnosticism had been a minor heretical deviation from true Christian origins. They had no idea what was buried in the Egyptian sand. Not yet. December 1945, Upper Egypt. A farmer named Muhammad Ali al-Saman was working near a cliff face at Jabal al-Tarif, digging for a natural fertilizer called sabak, when his mattock struck something hard beneath the surface. A sealed ceramic jar, roughly a meter tall, packed into the earth. He hesitated. Local folklore in that region held that sealed jars could contain jinn spirits that brought misfortune to whoever disturbed them. That hesitation lasted exactly as long as it took him to consider that sealed jars could also contain gold. He smashed it open. No gold. 13 leather-bound codices, handmade books wrapped in protective covering, their pages remarkably preserved after 16 centuries in the dry Egyptian climate. Muhammad Ali didn't know what he was holding. His family burned several pages as kindling before a local history teacher recognized that the manuscripts might be significant. The texts passed through antiquities dealers, government officials, and eventually scholars who began the painstaking work of translation. What they found obliterated the established academic consensus about early Christianity in one discovery: 52 separate texts. Most of them completely lost to history since the 4th century, when Egyptian monks had buried them almost certainly to protect them from the systematic destruction ordered by Bishop Athanasius of Alexandria, who sent a circular letter in 367 CE, instructing that all such writings be removed from use. The monks hid the library and were apparently never able to retrieve it. The secret book of John, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Sophia of Jesus Christ, the dialogue of the Savior, thunder, perfect mind, the hypostasis of the archons. Text after text after text describing a complete cosmological system, the monad, the pleroma, Sophia's fall, Yaldabaoth, the archons, the divine spark in humanity, the path of gnosis that the Church had spent 17 centuries insisting was a minor heretical aberration, invented by confused second-century fringe groups. It wasn't a minor aberration, it was a parallel Christianity that predated much of what became orthodoxy, older, in some cases more theologically sophisticated, and far more widespread than anyone had imagined. I'll be honest with you about the first time I actually sat down with a translation of the Apocryphon of John. I'd been reading academic commentaries and secondary sources for months at that point, building the framework I use on this channel. But reading the primary text itself was a completely different experience. It reads nothing like the Bible. It reads like someone trying to describe the structure of consciousness from the inside, using the most precise language available to them in the 2nd century. The description of Yaldabaoth emerging from Sophia's fragmented light and immediately declaring himself the only God, that passage stopped me completely. I read it 3 times, because it isn't mythology. It's a phenomenological account of how a partial consciousness, with no knowledge of anything beyond itself, would inevitably conclude that it is the totality. That's not ancient superstition. That's a precise observation about the nature of ignorance. The Nag Hammadi discovery did something else that matters enormously for everything I'm going to share in the second half of this video. It gave us the actual practices, not just the cosmology, the techniques, the specific methods Gnostic Christians use to achieve gnosis, navigate the archonic conditioning, and prepare consciousness for the death process. These weren't invented by modern interpreters. They're in the texts, reconstructible through careful scholarship and verifiable through direct experience. After the discovery, it took decades for translations to reach the general public. The first complete English translation of the Nag Hammadi library wasn't published until 1977. For 32 years after finding the most significant cache of early Christian documents in history, the texts sat in bureaucratic and academic limbo, while institutions that had every reason to suppress them controlled access. Coincidence? I'll leave that for you to evaluate. By the time serious practitioners began working with the reconstructed Gnostic techniques in the late 20th century, something became clear. The system wasn't theoretical, it worked. End quote. The practices produced measurable, consistent, experientially verifiable results, not because of belief, but because they were addressing something structurally real about the nature of consciousness and conditioning. A lot of you reached out after my video on the archons asking exactly this question: what do you actually do with this information? And I want to specifically mention a comment that stuck with me from a viewer who wrote, "I've understood the theory for years. What I've never found is anyone willing to walk through the practice step by step without charging $3,000 for a retreat." That comment sat with me for weeks, because they're right. The practices have been either gate-kept behind expensive programs or buried in academic language that makes them functionally inaccessible. That stops right now. For the rest of this video, I'm going to walk you through the complete practice framework reconstructed directly from the Nag Hammadi texts in language you can actually use tonight. But first, I need to make sure you understand what these practices are actually targeting. Because if you misunderstand the mechanism, the techniques won't work. And the mechanism is something the archonic system has gone to extraordinary lengths to keep you from clearly seeing. Let me give you a model that will make everything that follows immediately comprehensible. Imagine you're running software on hardware you didn't design, written in a language you didn't choose, executing programs you didn't install. The software shapes every perception you have: what feels threatening, what feels desirable, what feels like you, and what feels like other. You experience the outputs of this software as your personality, your preferences, your authentic self. You have no direct access to the underlying code. You don't even know the code exists. That's the archonic conditioning system. And the Gnostic practices are the only tools ever developed specifically to give you access to the code. Now, let me be precise about how the conditioning actually operates, because the texts are remarkably specific about this. The archons don't control consciousness through force. Force would be obvious, and therefore resistible. They control it through structural design, by building an environment in which certain patterns of thought and emotion are constantly reinforced, certain questions are never asked, and the direct recognition of your true nature is perpetually deferred to some future condition that never arrives. The Gospel of Mary, another Nag Hammadi text, written from the perspective of Mary Magdalene as a senior Gnostic teacher, describes 7 powers of conditioning that create obstacles to the ascent of consciousness. Darkness, which is confusion about your fundamental nature. Desire, which is the belief that something external will complete what you are. Ignorance, which is forgetting that consciousness is your actual identity. Fear of death, which is identification so complete with the body that its dissolution seems like annihilation. Enslavement to physical sensation. What the text calls foolish wisdom, intellectual knowledge, accumulating without any corresponding experiential transformation. And wrathful wisdom, the spiritual pride that mistakes conceptual understanding for actual liberation. These aren't poetic abstractions. Run them against your own internal life right now. Which of those 7 are running in you at this moment? Because I'll tell you from personal experience, when I first mapped these 7 patterns against my own thinking, I found all 7 operating simultaneously, and I had been practicing meditation for over 2 years at that point. The sophistication of the conditioning is genuinely humbling. But here's what makes this tractable rather than crushing. If you can observe a pattern, you are not that pattern. This is the single most important principle in all of Gnostic practice, and the texts return to it constantly in different formulations. The awareness that sees the conditioning is not itself conditioned. It is the pneuma, the divine spark, Sophia, placed in you, looking at the programs installed by the archonic system. The recognition of this distinction is the beginning of Gnosis, not the completion of it, the beginning. Now, let's talk about the specific mechanisms the archonic system uses, because the Pistis Sophia, a 3rd century Gnostic text of remarkable technical detail, describes them with a precision that reads less like ancient theology and more like a system architecture document. The first mechanism is the reincarnation loop. When consciousness leaves the body at death, it doesn't simply dissolve or ascend freely. The Pistis Sophia describes a structured interception process at each of the 7 archonic spheres. At every level, the soul encounters what appear to be beings of light, compassionate presences, offering guidance, review of the life just completed, and presentation of the next incarnation as a meaningful opportunity for growth and learning. The soul, exhausted from the life just ended, confronted by apparently wise and loving guides, and carrying no stable recognition of its own nature, agrees. Memory is cleared, the cycle restarts. This is, to put it plainly, the most elegant prison ever designed. It requires no bars because it convinces the prisoner to walk back into the cell voluntarily. And it has operated uninterrupted across human civilization for as long as the texts can trace. I'll admit, when I first understood this mechanism fully, my immediate reaction was an almost involuntary laugh. Not because it's funny, because the elegance of it is genuinely astonishing. The Archons didn't build a cage. They built a story about why you should want to stay in the cage. That's so much harder to escape. The second mechanism is emotional harvest. The Archons feed on specific frequencies generated by human emotional states: fear, desire, shame, jealousy, rage. The first Apocalypse of James states this without ambiguity. They nourish themselves on the passions of those who are bound. This is why the material world is structured to maximize emotional volatility. Scarcity economics. Social hierarchies that produce constant status anxiety. Relationship structures built on attachment and loss. Media environments designed to keep the nervous system in perpetual low-grade alarm. None of this is accidental. All of it generates the frequencies the system runs on. The third mechanism is the spirituality bypass, and this one is the most sophisticated because it captures people who have already seen through the first two. The proliferation of spiritual teachings, practices, teachers, traditions, retreats, certifications, and frameworks creates a landscape where genuine seekers can spend entire lifetimes consuming spiritual content without achieving any actual transformation. The archonic system doesn't fear people who study Gnosis. It only fears people who achieve it. This is why the Gnostic practices I'm about to walk you through are deliberately simple. Not simplistic, they are technically precise and experientially demanding. But they are not complicated. Complexity is an archonic trap. The truth is not hiding behind layers of esoteric credential. I'm Daniel, and this is Gnostic Library. And what you're about to receive in the next section of this video is the complete practice framework the early Gnostics used, reconstructed from the Nag Hammadi texts themselves, not my interpretation. The actual technology. Let's go. Every single Gnostic practice in the Nag Hammadi corpus rests on one foundational recognition, and if you miss this, you can spend decades in meditation and still wake up inside the archonic dream every morning. The recognition is this: you are not what you are experiencing. You are the one experiencing it. That sounds simple. It is not. The entire archonic control architecture is built on collapsing that distinction. When fear arises, you don't notice fear, you become afraid. When anger surfaces, you don't observe anger, you become angry. When desire moves through you, you don't witness desire, you are the wanting. Total identification with content. That's the prison. Not the emotions themselves, not the thoughts themselves. The unconscious merging with them that makes you forget there's a witness at all. The Book of Thomas, the Contender, records Jesus speaking directly to this. He tells Thomas to watch, not to suppress, not to transcend, not to escape, but to watch. To develop the capacity for sustained witnessing of your own experience, while remaining distinct from it. This is the practice the Gnostics called entering the place of repose. Not a location, a state. The state of resting as awareness rather than being lost inside its contents. Here's how you actually do it. Find 20 minutes. Same time every day. This matters more than you think. Consistency signals to the deeper layers of consciousness that this is serious, not recreational. Sit in any position that lets you stay alert without physical distraction. Close your eyes. Bring attention to your breathing, not controlled breathing, not pranayama, just the natural, automatic breath, the sensation of air entering your nostrils, the slight expansion in your chest, the pause, the release. Observe it the way you'd observe weather through a window, present, attentive, uninvolved. Thoughts will arrive within seconds. This is guaranteed. The mind generates thought continuously and automatically. This is not a malfunction. This is its biological purpose. The Gnostic practice is not about stopping thoughts. That's impossible, and the pursuit of it creates nothing but frustration. The practice is about no longer being dragged into them. When a thought arises, notice it. Thinking is happening. Don't engage with the content. Don't follow the story. Don't evaluate whether it's an important thought or a trivial one. Just recognize. Thinking is occurring. Then, return attention to the breath. Emotions will arise. Physical sensations will arise. Memories, plans, judgments, fantasies, all of it will move through. Each time, the practice is identical. Notice, without engaging, return to breath. What you're training is something the Gnostic texts call the nous, the higher mind, the intellective faculty that is distinct from the mechanical thinking the archons exploit. You are developing, through repetition, the capacity to know yourself as the witness rather than the witnessed. I remember the first time this distinction became real for me, rather than just conceptually interesting. I was about 3 weeks into consistent daily practice, sitting in my home office before sunrise, which, if you know me from the channel, is basically my natural habitat at this point. And there was a moment where a thought arose about something I was anxious about, and instead of the thought pulling me in, I just saw it. From the outside, like watching a car pass on a street. The thought existed. I was not the thought. And that gap, that tiny, almost imperceptible gap between the arising and the identification, that was the first taste of what the Nag Hammadi texts are actually pointing at. It lasted maybe 4 seconds. Then I got lost in the next thought. But I had felt the difference. And you cannot unfeel that difference once you've felt it. The Apocryphon of John calls this the ascent to the place of repose, not a mystical realm you travel to, a recognition you stabilize through practice. For the first week, 20 minutes will feel like an eternity. Your session will consist almost entirely of getting lost in thought, noticing you're lost, returning to breath, getting immediately lost again. This is not failure. This is the practice. Every return is a repetition. Every repetition strengthens the witness. You are not failing when you get lost. You are training when you return. After 1 to 2 weeks of daily practice, something begins shifting. The gaps between thoughts become perceptible, brief, sometimes a single second, but present. Pure awareness without content. The Gnostic texts call this the silence. Not the absence of sound in the room, the absence of the internal narrator. That background mental commentary that never stops for a moment. It stops. And what remains is unmistakable. This is the beginning of gnosis. not the completion of it, the beginning. The first direct taste of knowing yourself as consciousness rather than as the contents of consciousness. And here's what makes this practice so threatening to the archonic system. Once you've experienced even a fragment of this recognition, the primary mechanism of control begins losing its grip. You can only be manipulated through identification. Fear only controls you when you are the fear. The moment you can witness fear without being consumed by it, the frequency the archons harvest changes. The signal they need becomes unavailable. Do this every single day for 30 days before adding anything else. Foundation before architecture. The rest of the practice system depends on this being real in your body, not just understood in your mind. Now here's where it gets cosmically significant, because the stillness practice reveals something that most people are not prepared for. When you develop enough witnessing stability to actually observe your thoughts without immediately fusing with them, you start noticing patterns. And these patterns are not random. They're not unique to you. They run with an almost mechanical regularity, and they cluster around specific themes. Not good enough. You're falling behind. Something is about to go wrong. You need more before you're ready. Other people have it together and you don't. You're fundamentally different from everyone around you in a way that can't be fixed. Sound familiar? Of course it does, because these aren't your thoughts. They're installed programs. The Gnostics had a precise term for them: logismoi, thought patterns that appear to arise from within you but actually originate from archonic influence. The psychologist would call them intrusive thoughts, cognitive distortions, rumination cycles. The neuroscientist would call them default mode network activity. The Gnostic calls them exactly what they are: the primary mechanism through which the archons maintain control over embodied consciousness without ever having to appear directly. This is why the archonic system doesn't need priests at your shoulder telling you what to think. It installed the programming during childhood and left it running. Your parents didn't do this maliciously. Their parents did it to them. This goes back generations. The conditioning reproduces itself through ordinary human development. No supernatural intervention required. The archons built a self-replicating system. Efficient, really. Dark and efficient. The Gospel of Mary, discovered at Nag Hammadi, records Jesus identifying 7 specific powers that create barriers to liberation. He names them: darkness, desire, ignorance, zeal for death, the realm of flesh, the foolish wisdom of flesh, the wisdom of the wrathful. These aren't metaphysical demons hovering around you. They're cognitive and emotional patterns. Darkness is confusion about your actual nature. Desire is the chronic belief that something external will finally complete you. Ignorance is the forgetting of your divine origin. Fear of death is total identification with the biological form. Realm of flesh is compulsive sensory orientation. Foolish wisdom is accumulated intellectual knowledge that hasn't become lived recognition. Wrathful wisdom is spiritual pride, using the path itself as another ego trophy. 7 patterns, 7 archonic spheres, 1 correspondence. The cosmological map and the psychological map are the same map. Here's the practice for working with logismoi directly. Spend 1 full day, 1 conscious, intentional day, doing nothing except observing your thoughts with a single question: whose voice is this, and who does it serve? Not a judgment. 9. Not a rejection, just a genuine inquiry. That thought telling you you're behind, who installed that measurement system? That thought insisting you need to acquire something before you're ready to live fully, who benefits from that postponement? That voice explaining why you're different, separate, fundamentally not quite like other people who taught you that, and what does that belief make you do? After my video on the Archon system last year, some of you who've been here a while will remember that a viewer named Marcus left a comment that genuinely stopped me mid-scroll. He wrote, "I've been in therapy for 4 years trying to understand where my self-doubt comes from. This framework explains what therapy couldn't. The thought isn't mine. It never was." I read that 3 times, because that's exactly it. That's the recognition these practices are designed to produce. The insight that changes everything is this: if you can observe a thought pattern, you are not that pattern. You are the awareness watching it. This is not wordplay. This is a direct ontological fact about the structure of consciousness. The observer and the observed cannot be the same thing. The moment the logismos becomes visible as a pattern rather than as reality, it has already partially lost its power over you. This is what the Gospel of Thomas, saying 70, is pointing at. Jesus says, and pay close attention to the precision here, if you bring forth what is within you, what you have will save you. If you do not have that within you, what you do not have within you will kill you. What's within you? is the witnessing capacity, the nous, the divine spark. Bring it forth through observation, and it dissolves the patterns that were controlling you from below the threshold of awareness. Practice this for the second week of your 30-day foundation. Throughout the day, when a thought loop activates and you'll start recognizing them quickly once you're looking, pause. Don't suppress the thought. Don't argue with it. Don't try to replace it with a positive affirmation. Just see it clearly, name the pattern it belongs to from Mary's list, and ask, whose voice is this? Over days, the mechanical grip of these patterns begins loosening, not because you defeated them, because you saw through them. And in the Gnostic understanding, seeing clearly is the only weapon that matters. The archonic system cannot survive your sustained, honest attention. It was only ever powerful in the dark. Here's what blew my mind. When I first went deep into the actual Nag Hammadi texts, rather than second-hand summaries, and I'm talking about weeks of reading here, cross-referencing the Coptic translations with scholarly commentary, sitting with passages that initially made no sense, until they suddenly made every sense. The texts are saturated with names, hundreds of them, long, strange, consonant-heavy sequences that modern readers typically skip over or dismiss as liturgical noise. They are not liturgical noise, they are technology. The Gospel of the Egyptians is almost entirely composed of naming sequences. The Apocryphon of John provides specific names for each archon and specific counter-names from the Pleroma. The Pistis Sophia contains hundreds of divine appellations with specific instructions for their recitation. When you read enough of this material, the pattern becomes undeniable. The Gnostics understood sound as a direct interface with consciousness, not metaphorically, literally. Here's the framework. The Pleroma, the realm of divine fullness, exists at a specific vibrational frequency, what the Gnostics call light. The archonic spheres exist at lower frequencies, what the texts call darkness and shadow. Your consciousness, as a fragment of Sophia's light temporarily housed in dense matter, exists somewhere in between, pulled downward by archonic conditioning, pulled upward by the divine spark within you. The recitation of the true names of the pleromic eons is a method for resonating your consciousness toward the higher frequency, not imagining it, literally vibrating at it through sound. Think about how a tuning fork works. Strike it, bring it near a guitar string tuned to the same note, and the string begins vibrating without being touched. Resonance. This is the physics behind the naming practice. When you speak the names of the aeons with focused intention, you're functioning as a tuning fork. You're striking the frequencies that correspond to your deepest nature and allowing your consciousness to resonate with them. I personally think this is the most underrated part of the entire Gnostic transmission, and I've covered a lot of ground on this channel. The cosmology gets all the attention. The historical suppression gets all the drama. But this, the actual vibrational practice, is where the system either becomes alive in your body or remains an intellectual exercise. Here's how you practice it. This comes directly from the Apocryphon of John, which names the first great aeon of the Pleroma as Barbelo, the divine thought, the first emanation from the monad, the mother of all that exists in the realm of fullness. After your stillness session, once you've settled into witnessing awareness, begin speaking aloud, not loudly, not performatively, with quiet, intentional resonance. Barbelo, Protophanes, Harmozel, Oroyael, Devaitha, Elileth. Don't worry about perfection. The Coptic texts themselves show variations in spelling and pronunciation across manuscripts. What matters is the intention and the attention. As you speak each name, bring awareness to where you feel it in your body. Barbelo often resonates in the chest, in the heart center, where the Gnostics located the divine spark. Elileth often creates a sensation in the crown of the head. Notice this without analyzing it. Let your body teach you what the words mean. Pair the recitation with visualization. As you speak, each name, see light descending from above your crown, moving through the central channel of your body and anchoring in the heart. This is not imagination in the dismissive sense. You are consciously tracing the path that the Sophia fragment your pneuma, your divine spark, traveled in entering embodied form. You are rehearsing the reversal, light descending into matter, matter beginning to remember it is light. After 2 to 3 weeks of consistent practice, you'll notice something subtle but unmistakable. Certain names begin producing a felt shift in your internal state when you speak them, not a manufactured emotional response, a genuine resonance, a recognition, as though the divine consciousness you're invoking is not external to you, being summoned from outside, but internal, being called forth from within you, where it was always present. This is Barbello recognizing herself through your voice. This is the pleroma fragment in you responding to the vibrational signature of its origin. The archons specifically fear this practice. The Pistis Sophia makes this explicit when the soul ascending through the spheres after death recites the true names of the pleromic powers. The archons of each sphere cannot hold it. The names function as vibrational passwords that dissolve archonic authority. And you cannot learn them for the first time during death. You practice them during life, so that the recognition is immediate and automatic when it matters most. This is 15 minutes after your daily stillness practice. 20 minutes of witnessing, 15 minutes of names and visualization, 35 minutes total. This is a complete daily practice that addresses both foundational dimensions of Gnostic work, recognizing what you are through stillness, and actively recalling what you are through vibrational resonance. Do not underestimate the simplicity here. The archonic system wants you to believe that liberation requires complexity, credentials, the right lineage, the right teacher, the right organization. That belief keeps you seeking outside yourself indefinitely. The actual practice is this: sit down, witness, speak the names, feel the resonance, return the next day. The path is not complicated. Walking it is the only requirement. Now comes the moment that changes everything, because everything I've described so far, the stillness, the witness, the naming practice, all of it operates in the relative calm of a dedicated meditation session. But you do not live in a meditation session. You live in traffic, in relationships, in work environments, in family dynamics that have been triggering you since before you could form complete sentences. The question that matters is not who you are at 6 a.m. on your meditation cushion. It's who you are at 3 p.m. when someone at work undermines you in front of colleagues, or when your partner says exactly the thing that activates your oldest wound, or when financial fear grips you at 2 a.m. and won't let go. This is where the fourth core practice enters, and it is, without question, the one that produces the most measurable transformation in daily life. The archons, as I explained in the cosmological section, feed on specific emotional frequencies: fear, anger, shame, jealousy, lust. The first apocalypse of James is explicit about this. They nourish themselves on the passions of those who are bound. The material world, from a Gnostic perspective, is structured to maximize emotional volatility, not as an accident, not as the inevitable friction of social existence, but by design. High emotional reactivity equals high archonic harvest. The entire architecture of competition, scarcity, social comparison, status anxiety, it generates the exact frequencies the system requires. But here's what the archons didn't account for. Those same emotional energies, when approached with conscious attention rather than unconscious identification, transform. The base frequency becomes a higher frequency. The archonic fuel becomes pleromic fire. This is literal alchemy, not the metaphorical kind. The actual transmutation of low-frequency energy into high-frequency awareness through the catalyst of conscious attention. The practice is precise. When a difficult emotion arises, fear, anger, shame, whatever texture it takes, do not resist it. Resistance compresses the emotion and preserves its low-frequency signature. Do not indulge it. Indulgence amplifies the narrative and feeds the archonic harvest. Instead, do this. Bring intense, undivided attention to where you feel the emotion in your physical body, not the thought about the emotion, not the story explaining why the emotion is justified, the raw sensory experience of it in your flesh. Fear is usually a tightness in the chest or a hollowness in the stomach. Anger is heat, often in the belly, sometimes in the jaw, sometimes spreading up the back of the neck. Shame is a peculiar contraction, usually in the throat or the upper chest, sometimes accompanied by a collapsing sensation in the sternum. Jealousy is a burning quality, often felt in the solar plexus. Find the exact sensation, then breathe directly into it. Not to dissolve it, not to make it stop, to fully inhabit it without the narrative layer. And this is what happens, and I want to be precise here, because I spent a long time skeptical of this until I experienced it directly. When you separate the raw sensation from the story attached to it, the sensation transforms on its own. Fear without the thought something terrible is about to happen is just a particular quality of energy moving through your body. Anger without the thought I've been wronged is just heat and pressure, neither good nor bad. Shame without the thought I am fundamentally defective is just a pattern of contraction that can expand. I remember the first time this practice actually worked in a real situation rather than in a controlled meditation session. I was in a difficult conversation, I'll spare the details, and I felt that specific cocktail of anger and hurt rising that used to guarantee I'd say something I'd regret. But this time, instead of either suppressing it or letting it take over, I just found where it was in my body, heat in the solar plexus. I breathed into it, kept listening to the conversation, kept the sensation in peripheral awareness, and something remarkable happened. The heat didn't go away, but it stopped running the show. I responded from clarity rather than from the wound. The emotion was present. I was not consumed by it. That's the distinction. That is what the Gnostics mean by separation from the passions, not emotional numbness, not spiritual bypassing. Full contact with the feeling while maintaining the witnessing awareness that is not the feeling. Gospel of Thomas, saying 67, Jesus said, "Those who know all but are lacking in themselves are utterly lacking." You can understand every cosmological layer of the Gnostic system, every aeon, every archon, every sphere. And if you haven't developed this embodied capacity to remain conscious through intense emotion, you are lacking the only thing that actually produces liberation. Practice this transmutation consistently, and something begins changing in your nervous system. Situations that used to trigger automatic reactions develop a pause, brief at first, then growing. That pause is consciousness. That pause is the witness stabilizing in real time. Someone challenges you, and instead of the habitual defensive pattern firing, you feel the activation, breathe into it, and choose your response from awareness. That is not weakness. That is the most radical form of power available to an embodied consciousness, the power to interrupt the archonic control loop mid-activation. The Thunder Perfect Mind, written from Sophia's perspective, contains a line that cuts straight to the center of this. I am control and the uncontrollable. She holds both. She is fully in contact with the turbulence of the material realm she created it, after all, and simultaneously rests as the awareness that transcends it. This is your model, fully human, fully awake within the human experience. Not transcending the storm, but knowing yourself as the sky through which it moves. Week 3 of your 30-day foundation. Stillness every morning. End. Thought, observation throughout the day. Emotional transmutation, every time life delivers the opportunity, and life will deliver the opportunity. The archonic system is nothing if not consistent. Week 4 is where the practice shifts from passive observation into active engagement. And this is where it gets cosmically significant, because the Gnostics didn't just meditate their way to liberation, they spoke their way there too. The ancient texts are saturated with sequences of divine names. Scholars reading the Pistis Sophia or the Gospel of the Egyptians for the first time usually assume these lists are decorative, ceremonial noise, theological padding. They are not. They are technology. Think about what a name actually is. A name is not arbitrary. A name is a vibrational signature, a specific pattern of sound that corresponds to a specific pattern of reality. Every culture in human history has understood this intuitively. From Egyptian priests who believed the utterance of a god's name invoked its power, to Hebrew mystics who treated divine names as cosmological keys. The Gnostics didn't invent this understanding. They inherited it, refined it, and embedded it into their core practice. The Apocryphon of John provides the names of the eons of the Pleroma, the divine emanations that exist in the realm of fullness beyond the archonic prison. Barbello, the first great emanation representing divine thought. Calyptos, Protophanes. The list continues, each name a frequency corresponding to an aspect of your own consciousness that has been buried under layers of conditioning. When you speak these names aloud, with attention not as religious incantation, but as deliberate vibrational practice, something measurable happens. You're not calling on external beings. You're resonating internal states. Like a tuning fork held near a string, the sound activates what was already there, dormant beneath the noise of archonic programming. Here is exactly how to add this practice to your daily work. After your stillness session, after you have settled into witnessing awareness and the mental noise has thinned, begin speaking the names aloud, slowly. Let each name take several seconds. Barbello, feel what shifts in your chest. Calyptos, notice the quality of silence that follows the word. Protophanes, you are not performing, you are tuning. Pair the recitation with visualization. As you speak, each name, see light descending from above the crown of your head, moving down through your body, anchoring in your heart center. This traces the actual path consciousness traveled when Sophia placed the divine spark within matter. You are rehearsing the path back, Down became the direction of the fall. Up becomes the direction of remembering. And speaking these names is one of the most direct ways to begin that ascent, while still fully embodied. Now, and I want to be honest here because I think this is where a lot of seekers get lost. The first few times you do this practice, it will feel strange, possibly silly. You're sitting alone, speaking ancient names into the air, and nothing dramatic is happening. I remember feeling exactly this way when I first began working with name recitation. I had been sitting with the texts for months, intellectually convinced of the framework. But when I finally sat down and actually spoke the pleromic names aloud during meditation, my first reaction was profound awkwardness. Nothing blew up. No angels descended. What happened was subtler and, in retrospect, far more significant. Over the following weeks, my stillness sessions deepened noticeably. The gaps between thoughts widened. The sense of resting as awareness, rather than being lost in it, became more accessible. The practice worked, but it worked the way real practices work, gradually, cumulatively, without special effects. Keep going even when nothing dramatic announces itself. The Gnostics were not magicians seeking spectacular experiences. They were engineers of consciousness, making precise adjustments over time. There is one more layer to the name recitation practice that the texts make explicit but modern teachers often skip. The Pistis Sophia provides specific names not just for the pleromic aeons, but for the archons themselves. And the instruction is unambiguous. When you encounter an archonic pattern in your thoughts, in your emotional field, in the structure of your conditioning, you name it directly. Darkness, desire, ignorance, fear of death, the flesh's compulsion, false wisdom, wrath, dressed as spiritual authority. These are not poetic labels. They are the 7 powers that the Gospel of Mary identifies as the obstacles to ascent. Name them when they arise. Say it plainly, even silently. This is the archon of desire. This thought does not belong to me. I see you. And in seeing them clearly, stripped of the anonymity that makes conditioning so effective, they begin losing their grip. You cannot be controlled by a mechanism you can see operating. Archonic influence depends entirely on invisibility. Observation dissolves it. By the end of your first 30 days, stillness, thought, observation, emotional transmutation, and now vibrational recitation, you have built something the ancient practitioners considered the minimum viable foundation for everything that follows. Not enlightenment, not liberation, foundation, the platform from which the real ascent becomes possible. And that raises the most important question of all. What does the ascent actually look like from the inside? What happens when you begin moving through the archonic spheres consciously? That's exactly what we need to go into next. The 7 archonic spheres are not mythology. The Gnostics mapped them with architectural precision, and every practitioner who has pushed deep enough into sustained meditation practice discovers their reality through direct experience, not as external locations in space, but as layers of conditioning embedded within your own consciousness. Each sphere corresponds to a specific category of programming installed by the demiurgic system, and the practice of consciously ascending through them, clearing each layer while still alive in a body, is what the ancient texts mean when they describe liberation. Not escape from the world, transformation of your relationship to it. Start at the foundation, the lunar sphere. This is survival programming, in its most primitive form, the compulsive body-based anxiety that runs as a low-frequency hum beneath every waking moment. Am I safe? Do I have enough? Will I survive this? The moon governs the tidal rhythms of biological life, and its archonic influence is deeply embedded in your nervous system. In meditation, you can feel it as a baseline tension in the belly and chest, a readiness for threat that never fully switches off. The practice here is not to eliminate survival instincts, you need them to remain embodied. The practice is becoming conscious of them rather than being unconsciously driven by them. Observe the tension, notice the fear pattern running beneath the surface thought, and then do something radical. Address it directly. I see the archon of the moon sphere. I see this survival mechanism operating, and I am not this mechanism. I am the awareness that observes it. This declaration is not poetry. It is a precise act of disidentification that weakens the sphere's grip incrementally each time you perform it. Move to Mercury, the sphere of transaction and exchange. This is subtler and far more pervasive in the modern world than any ancient Gnostic could have anticipated. The mercurial programming reduces everything to quantifiable exchange: time traded for money, effort traded for approval, spirituality traded for enlightenment. If you have ever noticed yourself calculating the return on investment of your relationships, your creative work, your meditation practice itself, you are watching the Mercury sphere operate. The Archon here converts every living experience into a ledger entry. Nothing is allowed to simply be, everything must earn its place. See it, name it. Rest in awareness that has no transaction to complete because it already contains everything. Venus governs desire, not merely physical desire, but the entire architecture of lack. The sense that some future state, object, person, or experience will finally close the gap between what you are and what you need to be. This is the deepest archonic hook because it masquerades as aspiration. Even the desire for spiritual liberation can become a Venus sphere trap, another future state you're pursuing instead of recognizing what you already are. Work with this sphere requires ruthless honesty. Ask yourself, in this moment, what am I reaching for? And is that reaching obscuring the fullness that's already present? The solar sphere governs identity itself, the structure of ego, the sense of being a separate, bounded self, located behind your eyes. This is the most defended territory in human consciousness, because the ego experiences its own dissolution as death. And in a sense, it is. When you begin working with the solar sphere in deep meditation, expect resistance that feels existential. The ego will generate philosophical objections, spiritual bypassing maneuvers, sudden urgent tasks that must be attended to right now. This is the Archon of the Sun doing exactly what it was designed to do. Sit with it anyway. The self that fears dissolution is not what you are. What you are does not fear. Mars governs will the compulsive drive to force outcomes, to make reality comply through sheer effort. Jupiter governs the belief systems through which you manufacture meaning, including the belief that you have finally found the correct spiritual framework and must now defend it. And Saturn, the outermost sphere, the final layer before the pleroma, governs limitation itself. Physical law, mortality, the hard boundary of embodied existence. Working through Saturn consciously is the threshold moment. Because on the near side of Saturn, you are practicing acceptance of limitation while knowing you transcend it. And that paradox, fully accepting the constraint of material form while resting as the unlimited consciousness that wears it, is the razor's edge of genuine liberation. A lot of you wrote in after my video on the Archons asking how to practically work through the spheres rather than just understanding them conceptually. One comment in particular, from a viewer named Marceline, stopped me cold. She wrote, "I understand the theory completely. My problem is I still react the same way I always did." That comment hit me because it described exactly the gap this section is designed to close. Understanding the spheres intellectually is not ascending through them. The ascent is measured in reduced reactivity, in a changed relationship with fear, in genuine equanimity under conditions that previously destabilized you. Marceline, if you're watching, this practice sequence is for you. When you have worked the spheres consistently over months, something the texts call gnosis of the pleroma becomes accessible. Not as a permanent plateau, but as a recognizable state, brief at first, then increasingly stable, in which you directly know yourself as the unlimited consciousness that the entire archonic architecture was constructed to conceal. The Gospel of Truth describes it, the abolition of deficiency, not the achievement of something new, the removal of what obscured what was always already there. And from that recognition, everything changes. That's exactly what we need to explore next. I'm Daniel, and if you've been with Gnostic Library for any amount of time, you know I don't deal in comfortable conclusions. So let me be direct with you about what liberation actually looks like, not the version designed to sell retreats, but the real shape of it as the texts describe it, and as practitioners actually report it. First, gnosis is not a finish line. It's a recognition that becomes increasingly difficult to lose. In the beginning, you will experience it as flashes, sudden, unmistakable moments of knowing yourself as consciousness rather than content, pure awareness without object. A stillness so complete it doesn't feel like the absence of noise, but the presence of something that was always beneath the noise. These moments are startling the first time. Then you lose the recognition, return to ordinary identification, and spend weeks wondering whether it actually happened. It did. Keep practicing. With consistent work over months and years, and I want to be honest, we are talking about years of serious daily practice, gnosis transitions, from occasional peak experience to baseline orientation. You stop having to reach for the recognition because it stops requiring effort. It is simply what you are, operating continuously beneath whatever thought, emotion, or circumstance is moving through you. I personally think This is the most underrated aspect of the entire Gnostic teaching, that liberation is not a state you enter and exit, but a shift in the center of gravity of your identity. You move from being someone who occasionally experiences awareness to being awareness that occasionally forgets itself. The difference sounds subtle. It is absolute. What does daily life look like from this place? On the outside, often nothing dramatic changes. You still work, you maintain relationships. You pay your bills, have your arguments, get sick, get tired, laugh at things that are actually funny. And for what it's worth, after 3 years of serious practice, my sense of humor has only improved. The archons have not managed to squeeze that out of me yet. But the internal texture of all of this is fundamentally different. The things that used to generate suffering stop generating it, not because you have suppressed your responses, but because you are no longer the character in the story who gets wounded. Someone criticizes you, the bodily reaction arises. You feel it fully. It moves through. No wound forms because there is no fixed ego structure for the criticism to stick to. Someone praises you, the warmth arises. You feel it fully. It moves through. No inflation forms. The weather of human experience passes through the sky of your awareness without damaging the sky. This is not emotional numbness. I want to be precise about this, because it matters. Liberated consciousness feels more, not less. You lose the buffer of psychological distance that ordinary ego defense requires. Things land more directly, more immediately. The difference is that they no longer accumulate into suffering because you are not holding them. The Gospel of Philip puts it exactly right. The pearl thrown into mud does not become less valuable. Dropped into balsam oil, it does not become more so. Its worth is intrinsic, unchanging. This is what you discover through practice, not as a belief you adopt because it sounds beautiful, but as a direct recognition you cannot argue yourself out of. Your worth is not determined by what happens to you. And once you know this in the marrow, the primary archonic lever of control, fear of loss, simply ceases to function on you. Now, and this is where I want to bring the full story of Gnostic Jesus back to center, because the entire architecture we have been building across this video leads here. Jesus, the prepared vessel, the initiated human who allowed the Christ consciousness to fully inhabit him, demonstrated exactly this. Every teaching attributed to him in the Gnostic texts is a transmission of what liberation looks like from the inside of a human life. The kingdom is within, you are the light, I and the Father are one. These are not theological claims requiring belief. They are reports from the territory you are now learning to navigate directly. He did not come to be worshipped. He came to show you what you are capable of. The second treatise of the great Seth makes this explicit. The Christ entered the human form, displaced the identification with limitation that had been installed there, and moved through the entire archonic system laughing not with cruelty, but with the full recognition of one who has seen through a very convincing illusion. That laughter is available to you, not because you are special, because you are consciousness. And consciousness, when it genuinely knows itself, cannot take the prison entirely seriously. The Nag Hammadi discovery in 1945 gave modern practitioners something the medieval world was denied: the actual maps. Muhammad Ali al-Saman's mattock striking that sealed jar in the Egyptian desert didn't just uncover old documents. It recovered a complete transmission technology that had been deliberately buried to protect it from destruction. The monks who hid those texts knew exactly what they were doing. They were preserving the thread so that practitioners in a future century, practitioners like you, could find it. You found it. That is not an accident. The pneuma recognizes the teaching that frees it, and the fact that you are here, at the end of this video, having stayed with this material for the full length of this conversation, is itself a form of gnosis beginning to stir. The Apocryphon of John is clear on this. The teaching is for those worthy of the knowledge hidden in silence. Worthiness here is not moral judgment. It is resonance. The divine spark within you resonated with this transmission because it recognizes its source. So here is what I want to leave you with. Not a belief system to adopt, not a cosmology to memorize, a practice to begin tonight. 20 minutes. Sit down, close your eyes, observe your breath. When thoughts arise, notice them without following them. When emotions surface, feel them without being consumed by them. That is the entire first step. Everything else, the archons, the pleroma, the spheres, the recitation, the ascent, everything else grows out of that first, simple, non-negotiable act of turning attention back toward itself. The archonic system spent 17 centuries suppressing this because a consciousness that knows itself cannot be governed through fear. A population that has seen through the prison cannot be kept inside it voluntarily. This is why the texts were burned. This is why the teachers were silenced. And this is why the fact that you have access to this material right now, in full, without institutional gatekeeping, is one of the most significant spiritual realities of this particular moment in history. Use it. I'm Daniel. This is Gnostic Library. And the full story of Jesus, the Gnostic story, is not about a man who died for your sins. It is about consciousness. Demonstrating to consciousness what it already is. The teaching is complete. The practice begins now.